Well, howdy doody there, campers. It's your friendly neighborhood atheist here. How's it going? I'm making this video a day late because I was busy yesterday. After going to church, I went and hung out with a whole bunch of atheists for the day just to prove to myself that I am actually an atheist. I get comments and messages a lot like, are you really an atheist? You seem to not hate religion very much. I don't really know how to prove that I'm an atheist unless I go and get like a positive syphilis test or something. But otherwise, you'll just have to take my word for it, I guess. It's kind of a weird thing having your lack of faith questioned. Anyway, this week I went to Open Door Church. So I figured that this was another non-denominational megachurch, and I was half right. It's a big church. It's only got one campus, so perks for that. I pull up to this very, kind of generic looking church building. Oh my God, the welcome committee looks so nice. And I see oh, there's guest parking. So I go and find the guest parking and, they had the whole thing on the website, oh, come and visit and be a guest and all that. And they have greeters on the outside, ushering everyone in the 15-degree weather. And nobody said hi to me. And I don't want to sit here and pretend that it's a big deal, because it's not. The greeters could be shy.
I'm shy too.
Or maybe they didn't want to be intimidating, there's 1,000 explanations for why that is. But for all of the crap that I gave Summit Church a couple weeks ago, I did really like that somebody walked up to my car when I clearly parked in the visitor space, and that was really nice. So, the church was very normal. It was a very normal evangelical church. I only found out afterwards that this was another Southern Baptist church. And at a certain point, I just really have to wonder why. I mean, if it really is just, hey, there's not enough room here for more people and we need to expand, that's fine. So yeah, I walked in, I kind of, slumped in the back. And it was fine. I'm gonna give this church 4 out of 7. Don't push your luck. Biscuits. With gravy. There just wasn't a whole lot to write home about, and I don't think that is really saying much. I don't think that every church has to have some, slam dunk, home run, super crazy thing that makes them special.
He's being called the flying pastor.
It was just kind of a, modern church. So the sermon was not preached by the lead pastor or the executive pastor, which this church has both. For some reason, I can't keep up with the terminology. Instead, the sermon was preached by the youth pastor, and he did a pretty solid job. He was talking about the story in Joshua about Rahab the prostitute.
I'm a hooker.
And it was a good sermon about the universality of the gospel, right? That even a prostitute can accept the gospel and be saved. Awesome. But there's one thing that he said that I want to hone in on.
What a glorious picture that in Revelation, in white robes right beside us, will be Rahab the prostitute. And there will be one of every tribe, language, and tongue that no one can number. And yet they will all be singing, "Worthy is the Passover Lamb."
Now, there's nothing wrong with what he said. He read the text exactly how it's written. I don't think there's any problem with how he did this. So I'm not picking on this youth pastor. However, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to complain about something that I've wanted to complain about for a long time. So here's my hot take. A lot of Christians are terrified of heaven. And it's terrifying to a lot of Christians because the way the Bible describes heaven is in very underwhelming terms, at least in the way that they interpret it. So the way that heaven is normally discussed by pastors is normally something like, and it's gonna be amazing. We're gonna get there and we're gonna be singing and there's gonna be angels and it's just gonna go on forever and ever and ever and ever. And the pastor, has all the best intentions, but invariably it comes across as a little creepy. And then invariably the youth pastor has to make a joke about how, it's gonna be like a Taylor Swift concert, except step aside, Swifties, because it's gonna be angels. And if I had to guess, I would place this as one of the biggest reasons for why people start to doubt the faith. It isn't just that heaven is talked about in really underwhelming terms, it's that it's actively scary. I remember being a kid and one of my best friends who was a really devout believer, he said, sometimes I don't want to live forever. The thought of existing in eternality and not being able to turn it off is terrifying. And I was really sympathetic to his fear. I think a lot of people fear that, especially if you think that living forever means just constantly singing, right? Like, that's just creepy. So allow me to put my, former Christian apologist hat on and explain why heaven shouldn't be creepy or shouldn't be feared by believers. It's a very weird sermon. So even as a Christian, I would often talk about God in Platonic terms. So I didn't believe that God was just good. I believed that he was the source of goodness, that everything in the universe that can be said to be good is only good because it is a reflection of God or an extension of God, or it has similarities to God. In the same way, anything that is beautiful can be thought of as something that is resonating with the beauty of God. This is also the answer to the Euthyphro dilemma, but that's another video. And so, kind of in Platonic terms, the idea of heaven is being in the presence of God. And being in the presence of God is being in the presence of goodness itself, in the presence of joy itself, in the presence of beauty itself. Every good thing, every true thing, every beautiful thing is him. And when you talk about it in those terms, if you say, well, yeah, but heaven just still sounds creepy to me, then you have to pivot and say, well, that's just a failure of your imagination, because you're talking about a place that is perfect, where there is no suffering. And so if you think, oh, I'm going to be bored, no, you're not getting it. Boredom doesn't exist in that place. It's that everything good and beautiful and wonderful in your life is amplified to its most perfect end. So when you're talking about the climactic joys of sex and the beauty of friendship, the comfort of family, the satisfaction of a really good meal, all of those things amplified a millionfold over and over and over again to such an extent that it never gets old, that starts to become a more enticing vision of heaven. The way that C.S. Lewis describes heaven, it's like this echoing, never-ending crescendo that keeps getting louder and louder and more glorious and more incredible. This ineffable joy that overtakes you, dripping like honey, and every second you think, oh my God, this couldn't get any more intense, and then it gets more intense, and then it couldn't get any more beautiful, and then it gets more beautiful. And it's like that perpetually, and you somehow become one with God himself, who is goodness embodied. And it's a much more compelling image of heaven. I mean, fuck, I want to go there. And if that still sounds, uninteresting or unappetizing, it's just a failure of your imagination. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just acknowledge it. C.S. Lewis talked about that as well. He's got this bit in The Weight of Glory, something along the lines of, if a young kid is playing in the mud and making mud pies, and you ask him like, oh, do you want to go on like a, holiday cruise? He's like, no, I want to play with my mud pies. But that's only because he doesn't know the true joy of what he's turning down. He doesn't understand what's being offered to him. And it kind of bugs me that I don't know that I've ever heard of a pastor talk about it in those terms. I think the vast majority of times I've heard Christians talk about heaven, it's creepy. And believe it or not, this is actually a long-standing issue in the church. There was an ancient Christian document called the Apocalypse of Peter. Now, it's not actually written by Peter, it's a forgery, but in it, it imagines Peter is taken on a journey of heaven and hell by Jesus. And it's the funniest thing because he describes heaven in like a paragraph. And he says something along the lines of like, and then Jesus took us to heaven, and boy, howdy, was it wonderful. There were smiling porcelain faces everywhere and clouds, and it was great. I mean, it's literally like 6 sentences. And then he talks about, hell, and he's like, and then Christ showed us the everlasting depths of Sheol. And I mean, it's just paragraph after paragraph of like people who commit abortions being strung along by their hair, or like adulterers, with their genitals scorched by like hot sulfur. I mean, it's just craziness for like several pages. The book wasn't too fondly remembered, and I mean, it's not like a classic of Christian antiquity or anything, but it does reinforce the idea that we have a propensity to catastrophize and think much more vividly about negative potential outcomes than beautiful potential outcomes. And so I think my challenge to Christians everywhere would be, meditate on good things. Meditate on heaven, meditate on God. Because if you're preaching more hellfire than you are heaven, I think you missed the mark. Because I think that if you're a Christian, you have to believe that the glory of God and the glory of Christ is infinitely more beautiful than hell is terrifying. Now, maybe I'm crazy, maybe my atheist friends will hate me, but I think the world would be a better place if Christians had a more vivid, more beautiful, more robust vision of heaven than they currently do. And their failure to emphasize it and meditate on it and proclaim it is a failure in abiding by Philippians chapter 4. Yeah, if there's anything praiseworthy, think about those things. Because I think people are better when they're really excited about beautiful things. And I'm okay with Christians being really excited about heaven. So again, not picking on this church, not picking on this pastor. It was fine, it was good. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for this church. Not bad. My name is Jared, I'm an atheist. I'm wearing a hat today for some reason. Go to church. All right, get out of here.